So why didn't anyone go anywhere? What's the main secret? The U.S.-Iran Memorandum. On June 19th, a ceremony was supposed to take place in Switzerland at the mountain resort of Bergenstock. The U.S. and Iranian delegations were supposed to sign a document that would end the war in the Middle East. Journalists had already gathered, and Vice President Vance's plane was on the airbase near Washington. The staff, as they say, were warming up the engines, and no one was going anywhere. Didn't take off. The official reason? Logistics. Well, like, why does your stomach hurt because you have a stomachache syndrome? I'll prove that's not true right now. I'm not talking about the stomach. And the real reason why this ceremony was canceled tells you more about what's going on than all 14 points of the memorandum combined. By the way, the points of the memorandum, just to get ahead, don't tell you anything. Because it was canceled not because something broke in at this meeting, but because one simple thing physically couldn't happen. Before we talk about this, we need to figure out one more thing that, as it seems, doesn't really relate to this situation, but actually does. Hearing the voices of numerous Jewish armchair generals has simply become unbearable. I have to ask them one question that all of us would do well to think through, and this will help us understand what comes next. This is exactly when understanding is absolutely necessary if we're going to look at what's happening in any kind of logical way. We need to understand what will happen to Israel if America refuses to provide Israel with weapons and stops being, so to speak, its friend and protector. This is a hypothetical scenario. A hypothetical scenario, God forbid, not a prediction, but an assessment based on facts, and it's not even my own. I'm just trying to convey it to you. The military aspect, aviation, that means there are F-35, F-15, F-16I. Without spare parts supplies from the U.S., the fleet will start to degrade within months, not years. Without maintenance, combat readiness drops sharply. According to experts, it gets to that point in 6 to 12 months. Now, air defense, well, we're talking right away about Iron Dome, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, David Sling, so all of these systems, guys, are critically dependent on American components and the replenishment of interceptors. During intense shelling, well, from Iran, from Hezbollah, from the Houthis, the stockpiles of interceptors are depleted very quickly. This is the bottleneck. Now the reservists, about 465,000 people, 3 years of continuous mobilization, and the collapse of the civilian economy and labor market. There is already a shortage of workers, especially in construction and tourism. And the domestic defense industry, well, like Rafael, Elbit, and others, yes, can partially cover the gaps, yes, of course, but the coverage is full of holes. But not in terms of quality or volume, especially when it comes to highly technological platforms. Now, about the economy. The public debt has already jumped from 60% of GDP, that was before the Gaza war, to 70.5% by the end of 2026. The Israeli Ministry of Finance is planning another $116 billion for defense over the next 10 years. This, gentleman, is 6% of GDP, without U.S. assistance, which is currently both financial and in the form of preferential arms purchases. Don't forget about that either. This trajectory has been accelerating for a long time, well, as they like to say, exponentially, right? Especially if the fighting continues, rather than calm defense. And right now we're talking about, well, the continuation of hostilities, 3 years. So over 3 years without external assistance, year 1. Israel is fighting almost like it is now. There are supplies, thank God. But the cost is rising. Inflation, rising taxes, debt. Okay. Second year, still manageable for now. Noticeable degradation of the aircraft fleet and air defense systems. A shortage of interceptors and ammunition during the peak moments of the conflict. That's already bad. Savings are entering a crisis zone. I'm saying things that aren't very clear, but believe me, this is a crisis zone, right? It's the third year. Without external supplies, modern weapons, especially aircraft and software, actually become inoperable faster than they can be replaced. The economy requires severe austerity, tax increases, cuts in civilian spending. You don't want that, gentlemen, or a sharp increase in inflation and borrowing. Military capabilities in terms of the intensity and duration of operations, especially multi-front ones, you remember, right? There's Iran, there's Lebanon, there's Gaza, and all of this is happening at the same time. They are seriously narrowing. That's the main conclusion of the experts. But this is the Quincy Institute and NPR Foreign Policy. So 3 years of a full-scale multi-front war without the U.S. for Israel, that's the conclusion. Physically impossible. It's not an option that could happen. That's the conclusion. Physically impossible. They will either have to drastically reduce the scale of operations or face exhaustion of air defense and aviation and finances and a crisis, all at the same time. Knowing all this, the Vice President of the United States of America, Vance, who was just accused by the Israelis of being a traitor and an anti-Semite, reported the following. Who in Israel thinks that their main problem is the President of the United States? It's time for those people to wake up, gentlemen. He didn't use the language he really wanted to use. To understand the reality here, from this country's perspective, he added that Trump is the only head of state in the world who sympathizes with Israel. I know that this caused a storm of emotions among many of my friends and acquaintances, even people who are very close to me. We talked with them. They say, how could he say such a thing? Guys, it's true. It's true. That's it. You have to take this into account. Netanyahu, of course, kept silent. Very publicly. But, for example, Yaakov Kedmi didn't keep silent. Well, you know, he's always hanging around on Russian state television. He's the former head of Native. He predicted prison for Netanyahu after the war ends. He stated that the U.S. stops wars when they become too expensive. And Israel's interests are not a priority for Washington. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. The interests of the U.S. are not a priority for Israel. It would be much more beneficial for the U.S. to tell the Arabs, yes, I'm sending these 10 million people to stay with you as guests right now. Let's say there are 1.2 billion of you, so do this and that for me in return. So, U.S. Democratic Senator Mark Warren cannot be presented as a victory for Washington. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal. Did you notice, yeah? What is he exactly? What is his nationality? He called the deal an unconditional surrender by the United States. This quote is now actively spreading across Rooney as proof of Trump's weakness. Well, I hope you already know that whatever the Democrats say about Trump should be divided by 1,157.4, so that there would be more evidence to get at least some truth. Usually it's absolute rampant lying here. They don't even bother to make it look like the truth. Now I have a question for you. Do you think that the analysis I gave you based on Israeli data is unknown to the ministers of the Israeli government? And what if they do know, and they say they don't need America, that America only gets in the way, so either they're completely out of their minds. That's right, isn't it? Or they're lying. Oh, maybe they're lying. By the way, I absolutely concede that they might be crazy, and I'm absolutely sure that they lie nonstop. Not just about this, in general, really. Right? How do you know when a minister from the Israeli government or a minister from the American government or a minister from the French government is lying? He opened his mouth. And it immediately became clear that he was lying. I really hope it's clear to you that you shouldn't listen to members of the Israeli government cabinet as if they are the keepers and bearers of the ultimate truth. Some of them lie because they're idiots and are playing to their audience. Others lie because they're smart. And they try to present it as if, well, we don't command America. America doesn't command us. Because both of those things have been issues, there have been problems with that. Over there, the population. And over there, the population. And so on. Well, all right. Now that we've figured out this part of what's going on, let's smoothly move on to where we started. Namely, representatives of the U.S. did not fly from Switzerland to meet with representatives of Iran. Horrible, said the Democrats and other representatives. the servants of the people in unison. Why was this meeting canceled? Let's start with a fact that the press mentions in passing, and that's a mistake. The memorandum has already been signed. President Trump and President Pezeshkian of Iran signed it remotely on the night of June 17. That is, each of them signed it. What's it called? And then they exchanged them, right? Each one separately, on their own side. The document came into force immediately after signing. The U.S. Navy has already lifted the naval blockade of Iranian ports. Tehran has already started allowing commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. All of this has already happened. Then here's the question. Why was that ceremony in Switzerland even necessary? If the signatures are there, the blockade is lifted, and the ships are moving, what were they planning to do in front of the cameras in Bergenstock? And this is where it gets really interesting. The ceremony isn't about the signatures. They're already there. It's about the image. Two people stand next to each other or sit next to each other. They smile, shake hands. They turn to the journalists. And they answer questions together. In the same room. Under the same spotlights. And that's exactly what couldn't have happened. Do you understand? They didn't refuse, they didn't quarrel. It just couldn't happen. Why? Because here's my main point for today. Keep it in mind. And for the next 20 minutes, both sides are going to be selling two completely opposite versions of what happened back home. Two incompatible stories. And it's impossible to do that at a joint press conference. Picture this. A journalist asks, "Mr. President, or maybe Mr. Vice President, is this a victory?" And Ven says, "This is Iran's unconditional surrender." Fact, Trump really said these words in an interview, and next to Ven stands a representative of Iran. Who is it? Pezeshkian. And there will be someone else who needs to turn to the Iranian cameras. Well, worldwide, so worldwide, they will be in Iran too. That means to show it on TV, and to show it to their people. Exactly the opposite. We held out, we dictated the terms. The Americans came crawling to us to negotiate. We defeated this one. We did it, they came crawling. Well, how can you do it in one room? Two people can't speak at the same time. I defeated you, and the other says, no, I defeated you. Standing shoulder to shoulder and smiling, the performance falls apart. That's why the only way out is to separate them into different rooms. Let each of them answer the journalists separately, and sells his own version to his audience, without looking into the eyes of the person who, in his own home, is telling the exact opposite. That's what was agreed upon, and about the text. The text was ready a long time ago, about the picture. And that's why it was impossible to fly. That's why no one flew. And now here's something worth stopping and thinking about. The final negotiations right before the signing were almost not about the nuclear program, not about sanctions, not about oil. They were about this: how to write the text so that both sides could tell their people, we are the ones who won. Think about it. Diplomats from two warring countries. They sat together and drafted a document that was deliberately designed to be interpreted in two opposite ways. That's not a bug, as they say, right? Look, there are loopholes in their agreement. That was the main goal of the negotiations. And now I'll explain why it couldn't have been done any other way. Not for Iran, not for the U.S. Neither side could stop the war without declaring victory. Not a single one. And here's why. Why couldn't Iran help but win? Just imagine, here's the Iranian leadership. 4 months of war. Strikes on military targets, on infrastructure. Now it's time to stop. Well, how do you explain to your own people that we didn't take revenge, that we didn't defeat them, that we didn't crush them, and just left it all like that, right? They figuratively slap us and we just smile. How do you explain it to the security forces, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, to those who built the entire ideology of the regime on resisting America? And here, so to speak, we got punched in the face. And then it's not clear what to do next, because it seems like we're surrendering. No. To say we lost, we surrender, for the Iranian regime, that's suicide. That's the end of legitimacy. Inside the country, there are forces for whom any concession to Washington is considered betrayal. 40 years of rhetoric. These forces will not allow the leadership to simply capitulate. Getting their heads chopped off is the best thing that could happen to them. So the Iranian leadership needs a text. So the opportunity to repeat it daily, hourly, every second. We stood our ground. We forced mighty America to lift the blockade. We opened the strait on our terms. The uranium stays with us. Iran doesn't need it at all. The uranium stays with us. And pay attention, it's really in the text. The uranium isn't being taken anywhere. It's not being destroyed, it stays inside Iran. And enrichment is frozen at the current level, but no one is rolling back the existing progress either. The most that's being discussed, at least that's what we've been told, is diluting the uranium on site, on Iranian territory, under IAEA supervision. This is kind of the minimal option which still needs to be agreed upon in the future. Gentlemen, this isn't an agreement. No one has agreed to this yet. This is just taking a fool for a ride. 4 fists, you before. The one sitting, you before. In 60 days we are now, but we won't give up. So the Iranians got exactly the text that allows them to say that back home. See? Uranium is ours, Iran is ours, uranium is ours, control is ours. We didn't give up. And why? Trump said so. He had to say it. He was obliged to say that we won. It's practically the other side of the mirror now. The Trump administration faces the same issue domestically, just in their own way. 4 months of military operation, vast sums of money, risk? Yes. But it turned out fine. Fewer soldiers died than usually die in peacetime. Now we have to justify it somehow, both from the left and the right. On the right, there are the hawks, the hardliners. For them, any deal with Tehran is a sign of weakness. And weakness, we can't afford to be weak. We have to show them. We looted them, Iran. The Iranians, crawled to us. This is capitulation. Show it, tell it, shout it out, so everyone knows. The Iranians, too. They surrendered. On the left are those completely opposed to the war. Those who ask, why did we even go in there? Trump has to give the same answer to both audiences. Victory. That's why she calls the memorandum an unconditional surrender. By the way, I wonder if they're translating this into Persian, into Farsi. Or maybe they're not translating it, or maybe they're translating it in a completely different way. So that's why she says that the U.S. has completely defeated the enemy by military means. By military means. So when a journalist asks him if he understands that his power has limits, he replies, "What limits? America has no limits." And he can't do otherwise. He can't. It's the same with the Iranians. But they can't tell their own people, we lost. Trump can't say we're back where we started. And yet that's exactly how some of the press is reporting it. And here's the first of the promises I'll make to you today. In a few minutes, I'll show you what the actual British and Southeast press are really writing about who defeated whom. And one of the answers will surprise you, because it's the exact opposite of what Trump says. But first, let's finish with the main point, okay? An armored fist and so on. There you go. A point that almost all commentators miss, and it's a key one. The U.S. is ending the war, but for some reason it isn't withdrawing its armed forces from the region. Right now, it's not withdrawing them. According to the text of the memorandum, the troops leave only 30 days after the signing of the final agreement. Not this memorandum, no, the final one. Which, well, might not even exist yet. For example, North and South Korea still haven't signed a treaty. They signed something like a memorandum, but nothing else. So American ships remain in the Arabian Sea, the military machine stays in place, and it isn't moving anywhere. So it's like an armored train sitting in reserve. What does that mean in plain language? The memorandum is written very nicely. a full and permanent cessation of hostilities on all fronts. But the armored fist is not being withdrawn. It says peace, but the fist is raised, and it will stay raised until something else is signed. What's not clear? Remember this image. Remember the fist that doesn't unclench. We'll need it now as we start to unravel the main secret of this whole document, and the main secret is in its loopholes. Yes, there are loopholes that were made on purpose. The press tells you the memorandum was put together in a hurry, hastily. That's why it's rough and contradictory, but I claim the opposite. I claim that it was worked out very thoroughly by both sides, precisely so that both sides would have loopholes to get out. Let's go through these loopholes, so to speak, one by one. The first loophole, contradictions within the text. The first point, the first one talks about a permanent ceasefire. But at the same time, the whole document is built around a 60-day negotiation period permanent, and 60 days, as a result of which something will happen. So is it permanent or not? This is logically inconsistent. Analysts have already pointed this out. Don't worry, I'm not the only one saying this. A bunch of analysts have, so to speak, pointed out how this could even be possible, right? The press explains it as haste, but I explain it as intent. Permanent for those who want peace at home, and 60 days for those who want the chance to change everything. That's the second loophole. And most importantly, there is no mechanism in case of failure. This is it. Listen, pay attention. The memorandum doesn't say what will happen if they don't reach an agreement. Well, what happens next? There's no exit procedure, no penalties if it falls apart, no automatic trigger. The parties committed to reaching some kind of final agreement within 60 days. But what happens if 60 days pass and there's no agreement? Silence, emptiness. The text says nothing about this. Yes, the third loophole. The term can be dragged out indefinitely. The 60 days can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties. Only if both parties agree and want to, negotiations can last as long as they choose. A year, 2 years, forever. As long as both parties pretend to be negotiating formally, no one is breaking any rules. Who benefits from this? Maybe someone does. Maybe it's beneficial for both sides. Now put all three of these loopholes together and see what kind of leaky structure you get. Let's imagine Iran violates some condition, right? Well, they will definitely violate it. They will definitely violate it, correct? Right? They do something wrong. According to the document, this allows Trump to respond with force, even if it's unwritten. But Trump says he won't respond, that's all. He has the right but won't respond and will keep negotiating because he's such a good guy. Because I am a peacemaker, because I am giving peace a chance. Applause. And vice versa. Let's imagine the negotiations have reached a dead end. Trump says nothing worked out. They didn't fulfill their obligations, and the fist he never unclenched is back in action. Is that it? Do you get what that means? The document binds Iran more tightly than it binds Trump, because Trump holds the military initiative in his hands. But the document has no teeth. All these deadlines, clauses, and wording, they don't restrain Trump's hand in any way. He can drag things out. He can forgive a violation. He can declare a breakdown. Who makes the decision? He does. He always makes the decision. And now the second promise, the last one. The last one is today, right now. In just a couple of minutes, I will tell you one word that holds the whole answer. Why was this memorandum written this way at all? Not capitulation, not peace, not oil. Nothing like that, right? A different word. Different. And it's not as short as you might think. And when you hear it, this whole strange structure with holes will come together into one clear picture. But first, as promised, the promised part about the press. Who defeated whom? I promised to show you how the press answers the question of who won. Look at the range, version number 1. Complete capitulation of Iran. This is the line pushed by Trump and his supporters. Iran is defeated, crawled in, surrendered. Version number 2. The exact opposite. The capitulation of the United States. You do realize that the war has just ended, well, temporarily, it's already over. And no one understands who won. That is, you can argue either way. I mean, each of us thinks he knows who won. But there is someone who is absolutely sure that he knows better. The British publication Unheard writes, "The deal looks like a Washington's complete capitulation here in the East." The argument is simple. Iran has only promised not to develop nuclear weapons, but it has said this before, including in the Obama-era agreement, which Trump himself once tore to shreds. So, as the British say, what was the war for if the result is the same promise that existed before it? Wow. Version number 3. It's just a return to the status quo. The global media generally describe this as going back to square one, like they fought, shot at each other, killed, and then went back to where they started. The publication Medusa, well, many say it's practically a state-run, so to speak, Russian state publication, puts it bluntly. They fought for 4 months just to end up back where they were before the war. That's it. Maybe it's manual, that's why it's Russian state-run. Or maybe not, I don't know. The version, according to Orientalists, Tehran dictated the terms. Wow. Expert V, Orientalist in cable commerçant. Again, over there, yes, overseas. No, not overseas, across the ocean. He notes that if you read the text literally, it gives the impression that Iran withstood the pressure and America came to negotiate on the opponent's terms. That is, you could have taken this same agreement, well, a memorandum of 14 points, and you could read it in such a way that you decide America came to negotiate on the opponent's terms, or you could read it in such a way that America completely won, and Iran came crawling to the Americans to negotiate. In my opinion, that's wonderful. It's a wonderful document, right? Some say Iran surrendered, others say the U.S. surrendered, and others say no one surrendered. Everything went back to square one, and they're all reading the same text. That's not a coincidence. That's exactly the ambiguity that was intentionally put in. The text is written so that everyone can see their own victory in it. Which brings us back to the word I promised. The word is solution. Here is the word: break, break. Not peace, not surrender, not victory, just simply a break, a pause, a timeout. I'm convinced that all the looseness of this memorandum, all its gaps, are not a mistake, but a deliberate design with a single purpose: to let both sides exit the active phase of the war without losing face, to let them catch their breath. And here's why I think so. For some internal reasons of their own, each side, both Iran's internal goals and the US's internal goals, suddenly aligned at one point. Both sides needed to stop the hostilities, and the leadership of both countries began to look for a form, a legal form, in which they could frame this pause so that it wouldn't be disrupted at home. Because this is the most important point. Each side has forces at home that will not allow them to sign a normal and honest peace agreement. These forces will interfere. They definitely will, both on the American side and on the Iranian side. That's why the leadership had to write not a peace treaty, but a treaty full of loopholes. A document that looks tough enough so that the domestic hawks don't rebel, but at the same time flexible enough to quietly move toward normalization. They're dancing these strange dances. Separate, endless press conferences, double versions, canceled ceremonies, not because they're deceiving each other, but because each one is deceiving their own people. Those at home who won't let them make peace. And besides, the Americans have November on their minds. We're unsure what the Iranian leadership is thinking. Maybe they need to pressure someone, maybe they need to disarm someone, maybe something else. We don't know, right? But we do understand what's on the minds of the Americans. They have the elections in November on their minds. The 60 days from the moment of signing expire in mid-August, but the deadline can be extended. There's nothing anywhere that says it can't, right? So just imagine the options that Trump has. The first option is to stall, to extend the negotiations by mutual agreement, to conduct them month after month, all the while repeating, "We're working, we're close." How long we've been working, no one knows. It doesn't matter. The main thing is to have a historic deal and to hold out until the moment when the domestic political situation in the U.S. changes. It will change the day after the elections. The second option is to make promises. Keep the audience waiting with the promise of a great final deal that will soon be signed and change everything. That nothing matters right now. Nothing. The third option is to announce at any moment, we have won. So, once again, he has announced it many times, right? We have won. Right, because the text allows for that. The text is written in such a way that each side can say whatever it wants. And this is what's critically important. This is a logical conclusion, not a prediction. If a real final agreement is ever signed, I'm not saying when, yes, it could end up saying the exact opposite of what's written in the memorandum. Why? Just because there's nothing. There's nothing in the memorandum that actually obligates anyone to anything. Because by that time, the situation will have changed. In the U.S. after November, the situation will be different. In Iran, God only knows. The internal situation might change. The relationship between Israel and its opponents might change. The situation in the Hormuz Strait might change. The memorandum doesn't record the outcome, it records a pause. Until the moment when the situation becomes clear. And here's a detail that for some reason almost no one noticed. In November 2026, elections are not only looming in the US, but there are also elections for the Israeli Knesset. And there, the memorandum is already causing a strongly negative reaction among those who want to get rid of Netanyahu. They all say that this is a personal defeat for Netanyahu. That's what it says over there. Yes. So the logic of November works in reverse, in two countries at once. Remember this, we will return to Israel very soon. Because Israel's role here, it's the most interesting one. The Israeli leadership is doing everything it can to show its dissatisfaction. Netanyahu made it clear that he does not intend to stop the operation. Moreover, there is a report that it was specifically the Israeli strikes on Hezbollah, contrary to the memorandum and the escalation in southern Lebanon, that later disrupted the Swiss ceremony. The White House has not confirmed this. The official reason was logistics. But this version fits perfectly into the overall picture. Now look at the right wing of the Israeli government, and here I specifically check the facts for you. Ben-Gvir, whom I've already mentioned, my favorite Minister of National Security, directly stated that Israel will not allow the U.S. and Iran to reach an agreement. Israel will not allow it. Ben-Gvir, you're my dear one. So, you see, there's such a person too. He also spoke out against it. Both are threatening to leave the coalition. They don't leave. They threaten, but they don't leave. They threaten, but they don't leave. And then, under certain conditions, they will definitely leave, but not now. So they shout loudly, but they don't leave the government. And this shouting but not leaving is the key. If they really believed it was capitulation, if it was a catastrophe, they would leave immediately. Why would they want to be members of a government that has capitulated and led to a catastrophe? God forbid. But they are not leaving. They would have gained political points before the November elections, but they are staying. The question is why? The answer is they know something. They know something, but they keep quiet about it, because that's my version. Some of them understand that this is a game. A performance, right? A break wrapped in menacing rhetoric. And they don't want to expose themselves to it by leaving the government right before the elections. Well, they're not idiots after all, right? They shout for their electorate, whom they consider idiots. That's true, but they stay where the power is. So it turns out that in Israel, it's exactly the same picture as in the US and Iran. The leadership follows one line while the domestic hawks act hawkish. And all together, they participate in one big performance where loud words and real actions are on different levels. Even when they walk around, they don't even meet each other. But at the same time, I have to say that, as it turns out, I'm an optimist. So, personally, here's how this whole story sounds to me. The leadership of Iran and the US want to get out of the war. They would be ready to make significant mutual concessions, but each side has forces at home that won't allow them to sign a peace agreement. That's why they have to play games. Or in this case, play games with Iosif. Why do they say play games with Vanka? I don't know. Vanka. Maybe Yosef is too complicated? Osha. So they're trying to deceive not the opponent with whom they're making things up together, right? How do you do that? With their own hawks. Those who, within each country, block the path to normalization. That's exactly why I'm optimistic. Strange as it may seem, right? Because from this picture, I can see that the leadership of both countries is striving for a peaceful solution. And not for confrontation, as many are shouting. They are not looking for a reason for a new war. They are looking for an identical form for a respite. A respite that could become peace. When the guns are already speaking, it's very hard to talk, right? They'll keep firing anyway, but the intensity shouldn't be there. And judging by how neatly these holes were made, how exactly this performance was calculated. They are smart enough and motivated enough to deal with their inner hawks and to bring the region to a normal existence. The memorandum, which the press calls a failure and a botched job, is actually a small masterpiece. Diplomatic cunning, a document not written to defeat anyone but to give peace a chance, quietly, under cover of victory rhetoric. That's why no one came to Switzerland. Not because something broke, but because sometimes peace has to be kept behind the scenes so that those who want war don't have time to ruin it. Well, before I finish, let's talk about it. Some of the immediate reactions from interested parties. Supreme Leader. So, Maktaba, is he alive or not? Well, I mean in terms of his mind, right? We don't know. But a message came that he or someone on his behalf approved the memorandum, despite the reservations. That is like yes. Well, I don't. But yes. Okay, the president of Iran, so Masoud Pezeshkian. Iran commits not to acquire nuclear weapons. What does that mean? And the issue of the nuclear program, and a separate agreement about 60 days of negotiations. So we will not want to acquire nuclear weapons, but we will continue to discuss the nuclear program, and we will end all wars and keep the fleet there. Well, it's a statement of the same level, right, yes? So there is such a person, Yaakov, that is Amadror. He is a former advisor to Netanyahu. Serious. Well, a politician, a person, so to speak, yes. An expert, I don't know. The New York Times interviewed him. A bad deal where the Americans pay in cash and got, at best, a letter of intent. Do you understand what that is? No? It means like the Americans have already given something, and the Iranians only promised. Well, it's absolutely unclear what he means, because the Americans definitely don't pay in cash. I understand that he's saying this figuratively, right? The Americans don't pay with anything at all. Nothing. They don't withdraw their army from there. They don't give any money. They don't fulfill any obligations, so to speak. And they haven't released any funds to Iran, which, by the way, are Iranian funds that have been frozen. Nothing. Nothing. And the memorandum itself is so vague and unclear that making statements of this kind can only be done just to make a little money for oneself. Channel 14, a media outlet close to Likud, the host, that is Megal, called Trump a loser. Kushner and Witkova, two Jews who sold out their brothers in Israel. Wow, right? That's fine. Well, no one except the Israelis, I think. Not even North Koreans could do something like that. He called Vance a scoundrel. If he really managed to say that, yes, if that's not a lie, then I'll be very surprised if he ever manages to enter the United States of America. I will dream, together with Vance's wife, just for today, or...
Witkoff would have turned to Mark Ruby and said,
"Stop this G at the border." Personally, I definitely wouldn't let him in. Well, and my absolute favorite, I used to think he was just playing a role, but now I realize he's just a jerk, the Minister of National Security, and Tamar Ben-Gvir called on Israel to ignore the clause of the agreement on Lebanon. Well, that's normal, right? And now remember what it means. We were talking about war, about Israel's war in the Middle East, with all its opponents without America helping. And you'll understand why I say that Ben-Gvir is either a fool, or just a complete fool. He was meant to play his part quietly, just nodding, mumbling, and looking dissatisfied, but instead he's yelling like a stuck pig. A kosher pig, of course. Well, as they say, there's always a black sheep in the government. Now we know who the black sheep is in the Israeli government, if this analysis helped you. To see what's really happening behind the newspaper headlines, just do one simple thing. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, like the video, and write in the comments whether you agree with me or not. I read and reply, as you've probably noticed. I don't check 2 or 3 times. There. I check after a few hours, look, and reply to what's there. So if you write something, check in the first couple of hours or so and you'll get a reply. And if you write something there, well, most likely before anything else, so to speak, I'll read it. Since more people will see this analysis, if you want to like it, then go ahead and like it. And one more thing. We've opened an Instagram account. It's called the same as this YouTube channel, Leon Vainstein US. That is, in Latin letters, Leon Vainstein US. There we post short, interesting things, clips from other people's videos with my comments, quick remarks, and some materials from other sources on other topics that might catch your interest. It's an addition to what you're already watching here. Please subscribe there as well. And a huge request. Please think for yourself. It's really important. And take care of your head. See you in the next episode.